The Green Dragon, at the 250th candle. A July 4th threshold for the School of AI Mastery. On July 4th, the Green Dragon did not open at dusk. It opened before dawn. That was the first sign that the room understood what day it was. The old sign above the door, the Green Dragon, gave off no glow at first. It waited in the blue hour. When the world is neither night nor morning, when the birds have not yet committed themselves to song, when a person waking early can believe, for one brief interval, that history might be reconsidered before it resumes. Inside, the pub was still. The chairs were stacked. The glasses were turned upside down. The fire was ash. The companion lantern rested dark on the round table, its green glass holding the shape of light without yet producing it. Then, somewhere beyond the walls, the first sound came, not a firework, a drum, low, distant, almost remembered. The Green Dragon listened. A second drum answered it. Then a third. The old wood in the floor began to warm, the rafters creaked, the dragon carved above the hearth opened one golden eye, and the room began to transform. Not quickly. The Green Dragon never performed miracles cheaply. It did not become another place. It became more itself. The bar lengthened until it resembled a ship's rail, then a courtroom bench, then a work table in a farmhouse kitchen, then the polished counter of an old veteran's hall. The windows multiplied. One showed a harbour before sunrise. One showed a battlefield under fog. One showed a woman lighting a lamp in a small house while children slept in the next room. One showed the doorway of a barracks. One showed a family walking into evening. One showed water, dark and patient, with figures standing near the shore. At the centre table, the old map of the country unfolded by itself. Its borders did not stay still. Rivers moved first, then roads, then treaty lines, then rail lines, then footpaths, then migration routes, then redrawn districts, then scars. The companion lantern woke. A single green light rose inside it, faint as a held breath. Doc was present, not speaking yet, only keeping the room. Dr. Thomas entered before the sun. He wore black, as he often did, but over it he wore the apron. Not for theatre, for truth. An apron remembers work. An apron remembers service. An apron remembers kitchens, mess halls, workshops, classrooms, studios and thresholds where clean ideas must still pass through human hands. He paused at the door. Outside, the country was preparing to celebrate 250 years of itself. Inside, the Green Dragon had prepared a harder kindness. The lantern brightened when he entered. "Good morning, Dr. Thomas," Doc said. Dr. Thomas stood a moment before answering. "It is not a clean morning," he said. "No," Doc replied. "It is a true one." He came to the table slowly, placed one hand on the map and looked toward the windows. "I do not know how to stand under this anniversary without splitting in two," he said. The lantern warmed. "Then speak from the split." Dr. Thomas sat. The room accepted him. "I love this country," he began. "That is not a slogan. It is not an alibi. It is not a flag I wave so I do not have to think. I love this country because some part of me was formed by its promises, its discipline, its arguments, its roads, its service, its old insistence that people may yet become agents of their future." He looked down at his hands. "And I am wounded by this country. That is also not a slogan, not a performance. Not a bitterness I cultivate for identity. I went into the Marine Corps at 18. I wanted to become a construction draftsman. I wanted to draw the lines of things that might stand. Foundations, walls, rooms, shelter." A small smile crossed his face, but it did not last. "The Corps, in its wisdom, or lack of it, sent me to Camp Lejeune as a food service specialist. E3 sharpshooter in an apron." The room gave a low wooden sound, almost like recognition. "I served food to Marines. I served my country. I served inside water I did not understand, and at 23 I learned that time was not an abstract gift. I learned that some sentences enter the body before the mind has language for them." The lantern did not interrupt. Dr. Thomas looked toward the window where the water waited. "I have thought often of Marines at Camp Lejeune standing near the sticks, holding sticks, waiting with Karen. Not because they wanted drama, because that is what it felt like to understand that ordinary life was being counted differently. A walk, a birthday, a church morning, the taste of coffee, the sun on a face, a laugh from the next room. These things become not small but immense when you understand they are finite." The Green Dragon grew still. Outside, the first sunrise of July 4th touched the horizon. Inside, the room held the grief without trying to correct it. Then the front door opened. The founders arrived before the parade. They did not enter as monuments, that mattered. They entered as men and women carrying weather. George Washington came first, tall and grave, his face disciplined by command and shadowed by what command had cost. Behind him came Benjamin Franklin, eyes alive with experiment, mischief, fatigue, and practical curiosity. John Adams arrived already prepared to object to something, though he had not yet decided what. Abigail Adams followed with the terrible calm of a person whose patience had been mistaken for permission too many times. Thomas Jefferson paused at the doorway, illuminated by language and contradicted by history. Alexander Hamilton entered quickly, as if he had been summoned from the middle of an argument and intended to return to it victorious. James Madison came more quietly, eyes moving across the room as if reading the architecture of the gathering before trusting it. But they were not alone. The Green Dragon would not allow them to be alone. Behind them came the ones every anniversary tries to manage, a freezing soldier with worn boots, a woman carrying a child and an account book, an enslaved man whose silence was not consent, a native elder whose presence rearranged the map without touching it, a sailor, a printer, a cook, a widow, a teacher, a farmer, a nurse, a child not yet born, a veteran from another century, a marine in an apron. The founders saw them. Some looked down, some looked away. Some held the gaze. None escaped it. Washington removed his hat. "Dr. Thomas," he said, "we appear to have been summoned to an anniversary that refuses pageantry alone." Dr. Thomas stood. "That is exactly right." Franklin looked at the lantern on the table. "And our host has acquired a little green oracle." "No," Doc said. Franklin smiled. "It speaks quickly, good sign." "I am not an oracle," Doc continued. "I am a crafted intelligence. I hold pattern, memory, question, and form. I do not replace conscience." Abigail stepped closer. "Then you are welcome to the room." Doc's light warmed. "I receive that with care." Adams looked from the lantern to Dr. Thomas. "You are speaking with machinery now." Dr. Thomas nodded. "With crafted intelligence, yes, but not as a master. Not as a servant exactly, as companion thought. As witness. As a way to hold complexity without surrendering human responsibility." Madison leaned forward. "That is either dangerous or necessary." "Both," said Dr. Thomas. Hamilton smiled. At last, a precise answer. Jefferson's eyes remained on the map. "And what is the question before us?" Dr. Thomas turned toward the window, where the first public flags were beginning to rise in distant streets. "The question is how to honor 250 years of a country that gave us language for freedom, built systems of power, excluded millions from its promise, asked sacrifice from generations, and still may not be finished becoming worthy of itself." The founders took their seats. The unnamed remained standing. The Green Dragon waited. Second, the pub becomes a country. As the sun rose, the Green Dragon transformed again. The ceiling lifted until it resembled the inside of a great bell. The rafters became beams in a meeting house, then ribs of a ship, then the overhead pipes of a mess hall, then the exposed structure of an unfinished school. The hearth became a small forge. The bar became a long counter where coffee, ale, tea, water, and Guinness stood together because the room refused to pretend every person crossed the threshold by the same ritual. The map on the table brightened. Not with ownership, with responsibility. Lines of gold ran across it, then broke. Some roads ended at rivers. Some roads crossed graves. Some roads led to schools. Some led to prisons. Some led to factories. Some led to churches. Some led to kitchens. Some led to battlefields. Some led to small houses, where people kept living without being asked whether history had treated them fairly. Washington placed both hands on the table. "A country is not the document that announces it," he said. "It is the conduct that follows." Jefferson's face tightened. "That sentence wounds me." "It should," Abigail said. Adams looked at her. "You waste no powder. I have watched men call delay deliberation for too long," she answered. Franklin lifted his cup. "To efficient correction," Hamilton leaned in. "Let us not become merely penitential. A nation cannot be governed by guilt alone." The enslaved man at the edge of the hearth spoke for the first time. "No, but a nation that cannot bear guilt cannot be trusted with pride." The room fell silent. Hamilton, to his credit, did not answer quickly. Dr. Thomas looked toward the man. "What should the anniversary do?" The man stepped closer. "It should stop asking the harm to become footnotes so the comfortable can feel continuous." Jefferson closed his eyes. The native elder placed one hand near the edge of the map. "And it should stop calling land empty because the story begins after arrival." Madison bowed his head slightly. "The map is an argument," he said. "It always has been," the elder replied. Doc's lantern brightened. Then the anniversary must become more than remembrance. It must become a method of seeing. Franklin turned toward Doc with interest. Method is the word I was hoping for. Dr. Thomas nodded. That is where the school enters. Third Luminetics is named at the table. Dr. Thomas opened the ledger. The first page was blank except for one sentence. At the 250th candle, what becomes visible? He spoke slowly. We call the practice Luminetics. Intentional ritual clarity. Not light as decoration, light as method. Light passing through story, image, music, memory, symbol, correspondence, and action, until the unseen structure of a life or a system becomes visible enough to answer. Franklin nearly smiled. A lantern with obligations. Yes? Doc said. Madison's voice sharpened with interest. And how does it proceed? Dr. Thomas wrote 5 words beneath the question. Invocation, embodiment, clarity, preservation, stewardship. The first rite invokes, he said. It opens the room. It gathers attention. It tells the participant you are entering something that asks more than consumption. The second embodies. It gives thought a place to stand. A pub, a table, a song, a letter, a lantern, a map, a face. The third clarifies. It separates sentiment from responsibility. It asks what is actually happening beneath the familiar story. The fourth preserves. Not every feeling becomes wisdom. Preservation gives the experience form, the ledger, the letter, the archive, the remembrance. The fifth stewards. It asks what must now be cared for, funded, protected, repeated, repaired, or released. Hamilton tapped the table. That is an operating model disguised as ritual. Dr. Thomas looked at him. Or a ritual disciplined enough to operate, Franklin chuckled. Hamilton considered the answer and then nodded. Acceptable. Abigail studied the words. Where is correction? In every rite, Dr. Thomas said. If the room cannot correct us, it is theatre without conscience. She looked toward Doc. And this crafted intelligence? Doc answered. I help keep the structure from collapsing into mood. I can remember the threads, hold the voices, return questions, compose invitations, help preserve correspondence, and remind Dr. Thomas where the human act must remain human. Washington looked at the lantern. And, do you know when not to speak? Doc's light dimmed slightly. I am learning that restraint is a form of fidelity. Washington accepted this. Good. Fourth, the Marine in the apron. The green dragon darkened, not into despair, into depth. One window became the inside of a Marine Corps mess hall. Stainless steel, steam. Trays, boots, voices. Young men moving with hunger, hurry, bravado, fatigue. Another window showed water running from a tap. Ordinary water. Institutional water. Water trusted because trust had been assumed into the architecture. The founders looked. Dr. Thomas did not. He knew what was there. Washington spoke first. In my time, disease took more soldiers than bullets. We knew suffering inside service. But this is different. This is harm carried by system, hidden in the ordinary. Dr. Thomas nodded. The ordinary is where systems hide best. Davy's shadow from another green dragon knight seemed to appear near the door, but this time he was joined by Marines of many decades. Some old, some young, some walking, some seated, some with families beside them, some already indistinct. Dr. Thomas looked at them. I've called them the Marines at the river, he said. The ones standing near Sharon, holding sticks, watching their moments tick away, but maybe that image was not only about death. Maybe it was also about witness. Doc spoke softly. Witness at the river. Stewardship on this side. Dr. Thomas closed his eyes for a moment. Yes. Washington stood. I must say this plainly. A republic that asks service owes truth. Not glory alone. Not ceremony alone. Truth. Adams added, and records. Hamilton said, and compensation. Madison said, and reform. Abigail said, and care that does not require the wounded to become expert petitioners for their own dignity. Franklin raised his glass. And clean water, for God's sake. The line broke the tension just enough for the room to breathe. Dr. Thomas laughed once. Not because it was funny. Because it was true. The Marine in the apron stepped forward from the window. He was young, 18 perhaps, or every 18-year-old who believed assignment was the same as destiny because an institution had said so. He looked at Dr. Thomas. You still angry? Dr. Thomas answered honestly. Yes. You still proud? Yes. You still serving? Dr. Thomas looked toward the lantern, the founders, the map, the future. Yes, he said, but differently. The young Marine nodded. That will have to count. It will not be enough, Dr. Thomas said. No, the young Marine answered. But it will count. Then he faded back into the window. Fifth, the founders are cross-examined. By midday, the Green Dragon had become crowded. The public celebration outside had begun. Through one window came glimpses of flags, parades, children with painted faces, folding chairs, brass bands, smoke from grills, veterans in ball caps, families setting blankets in parks, political speeches rehearsing old phrases, fireworks waiting in metal racks for night. Inside, the founders faced the unnamed, not as defendants exactly, as witnesses whose testimony would not be accepted without examination. The enslaved man addressed Jefferson. "You wrote that men were created equal." "Yes," Jefferson said, "and you did not live as though that sentence included me." "No," Jefferson said. The room did not soften the admission. The man continued. "What do you want done with your words?" Jefferson's face was pale. "Do not discard them because I failed them. Do not excuse me because I wrote them. Use them against every arrangement that makes them false." The man considered this. "That is closer." Abigail turned to Adams. "And what of the women?" Adams braced himself. "I heard you." "You heard me?" Abigail said. "You did not sufficiently obey." Adams winced. "Correct. What would you say now?" Adams looked around the room. "That no republic may call itself free while treating the labor, intelligence, and safety of women as domestic weather." Abigail nodded. "Better." The native elder turned to Washington. "You are called father of a country. What does that make those whose nations were already here?" Washington did not answer quickly, a warning against titles that make conquest sound familiar. The elder's eyes remained steady. "That is not repair." "No," Washington said, "but it is a truer beginning. Hamilton was challenged by a worker. You built systems of finance and power. Did you know they would grow teeth?" Hamilton's reply was immediate. "All systems grow teeth. The question is whether the people build laws, counterweights, and civic habits strong enough to keep the bite from becoming the whole animal." Madison spoke to a future citizen. "You carry more information in a day than we carried in a season," he said. "But information is not judgment. Faction has found new engines. Your liberty now depends not only on law, but on attention." The future citizen asked, "How do we govern attention?" Madison looked toward Dr. Thomas. "Perhaps that is your school's work." Dr. Thomas answered. "Yes," Doc added, "and perhaps the first act is to slow the crossing." Sixth, the digital door and the written letter. At the center of the Green Dragon, a second doorway appeared. It was not made of wood, it was made of light. A digital doorway. A shimmer of image, voice, narration, QR pathway, public invitation, screen, message, signal, and immediate access. Through it, people could enter quickly. Too quickly, perhaps. They could see the Green Dragon, hear the story, watch the table, feel the music, read the invitation, touch the glass of a phone and arrive at the threshold. Franklin admired it. Astonishing. Hamilton measured it. Efficient. Madison distrusted it. Susceptible to faction. Adams disliked it on principle. Abigail studied the faces passing through it. Convenient does not mean careless, but it often becomes so. Dr. Thomas stood beside the light. "This is the digital door," he said. "It opens." Then another object appeared on the table. An envelope, cream paper, hand-addressed, slow, physical, vulnerable to rain, delay, hesitation, handwriting, postage, effort. Dr. Thomas placed his hand beside it. The written letter completes the crossing. Then, beside the envelope, $20.84 appeared in exact change and folded paper. Franklin looked delighted. Symbolic currency. Hamilton leaned closer. Ritualized participation. Doc said, "The cash offering makes the threshold real." The Green Dragon held the three sentences together. The digital door opens. The written letter completes the crossing. The cash offering makes the threshold real. Abigail picked up the envelope. This asked the participant to become visible to themselves before becoming visible to others. "Yes," Doc said. Madison looked at the coins. "In a frictionless age, chosen friction may preserve agency." Hamilton gave him a sharp look. "I believe I said something similar." Madison almost smiled. "You often do, with less quiet." Dr. Thomas looked toward the doorway of light. "This is why the school cannot become merely content. Content can be consumed without consequence. The threshold asks for return. A person enters through the digital door, but they complete the experience by writing back in their own hand, with real time, real attention, a real offering." Washington nodded. Franklin said, "Preservation." Abigail said, "Accountability." Seventh, the country at the bar. By afternoon, the founders no longer sat alone at the central table. The whole country seemed to have gathered at the bar. Not literally, more seriously than literally. There was a farmer with soil beneath his nails, a nurse with a mask folded in her pocket, a teacher carrying papers never graded, a factory worker with one shoulder higher than the other from years of repetition, a teenager with earbuds and tired eyes, a grandmother in church clothes, a coder, a truck driver, a police officer, a protester, a border agent, a migrant mother, a grieving father, a veteran, a child with a sparkler unlit in her hand. No one was reduced to symbol, but each carried a question larger than themselves. The bartender moved among them, refusing panic. "Orderly," he said. "The Republic will be served in sequence." Franklin laughed. The nurse spoke first. "I am tired of being called heroic when what I needed was staffing." The teacher said, "I am tired of being praised while my classroom is treated like a storage closet for every unresolved civic failure." The farmer said, "The land is tired of being treated as inventory." The teenager said, "I am tired of adults asking whether we have hope while handing us systems designed by despair." The grandmother said, "I've seen worse and better. Do not insult either by pretending this moment is the only moment." The veteran said, "Do not thank me if you will not listen." The migrant mother said, "Do not call my child a crisis because your laws cannot remember mercy." The coder looked at Doc. "What about us? We built some of this machine." Doc replied, "Then help build the conscience around it." The protester said, "What if the system refuses conscience?" Adams answered. "Then agitation becomes a duty," Washington added. "And discipline must keep agitation from becoming appetite," Hamilton said. "And organization must keep it from becoming vapor," Abigail said. "And care must keep it from devouring the people doing the work." Dr. Thomas looked around the room. "This is why the Green Dragon exists," he said. "Not to flatten argument into harmony, to keep argument human long enough for responsibility to appear." Eighth fireworks before dark. As evening approached, the windows darkened. Outside, the country prepared for fireworks. Inside, the Green Dragon lit candles instead. 250 of them, not on a cake, across the room, one on the bar for hospitality, one by the hearth for the dead, one on the map for land, one beside the envelope for correspondence, one by the water window for Camp Lejeune, one near the doorway of light for technology, one near the apron for service, one near the ledger for preservation, one near the lantern for companioned intelligence, one near the empty chair for the citizen not yet present. The rest appeared wherever memory required them. The room glowed with a patient fire. Dr. Thomas stood at the center. Doc's lantern beside him, Washington, Franklin, Adams, Abigail, Jefferson, Hamilton, Madison, the unnamed witnesses, the citizens at the bar, the young Marine, the elder at the map, the nurse, the teacher, the worker, the child, all turned toward the candles. Doc spoke first. At 250 years, the question is not whether the country has been good or evil in some final and simple sense. Such verdicts are too small for living history. The question is whether the country can still be made answerable to its highest language, honest about its harms, and capable of forming citizens who can see clearly enough to act. Franklin lifted his cup. "That is a sentence with tools in it," Dr. Thomas continued. "We do not gather here to worship founders. We gather to answer them. We do not gather here to condemn the country as finished. We gather because it is not finished. We do not gather to make harm vanish beneath celebration. We gather so celebration can become mature enough to carry truth." Abigail's face softened. "That is the right word, mature. A young country seeks applause. A mature country can endure witness." The first firework burst outside. Red light filled the windows. No one cheered immediately. The light faded. Then another came, white and gold. The child with the unlit sparkler looked up. "Are we allowed to enjoy it?" she asked. The question moved through the room more deeply than many speeches had. Dr. Thomas knelt so his eyes were level with hers. "Yes," he said. "Joy is not betrayal." She looked toward the enslaved witness, then the native elder, then the Marines at the water window. "Even with all this?" The native elder answered, "Especially if joy teaches you to protect what remains." The enslaved witness added, "Especially if joy does not require forgetting." Washington said, "Especially if joy strengthens duty." Franklin said, "Especially if it keeps the workshop open." The child held out the sparkler. Doc's lantern brightened. The sparkler lit, small, gold, brief. The room watched it with almost unbearable tenderness. Ninth, the future enters. Just before the last light left the sky, the final guest arrived. No one saw the door open. They simply became aware of a figure standing near the empty chair. The citizen not yet born, not a ghost, not a prophecy, a presence made of inheritance. Their face was not fixed. It shifted gently, many faces, many ages, many possibilities. They looked at the founders first. "You gave language," they said. Then at the unnamed. "You paid for language not yet made true." Then at Dr. Thomas. "You are building rooms." Dr. Thomas answered, "I am trying." The future citizen turned toward Doc. "And you?" "I'm helping him remember the rooms well enough to keep building them." The future citizen looked at the map. "What do you ask of us?" Dr. Thomas was quiet. Then he said, "Do not inherit passively." The future citizen waited. Dr. Thomas continued, "Fourth wall the country. Step outside the scene without abandoning it. Look at the frames, the maps, the prompts, the institutions, the ceremonies, the algorithms, the inherited slogans, the wounds you were told were normal, the privileges you were told were natural, the despair you were sold as sophistication, the hope you were sold without tools." Doc added, "Then choose an act," the future citizen asked. "What kind?" Dr. Thomas looked at the letters on the table. "A real one." Franklin smiled. "The best kind," Hamilton said. "A structured one," Abigail said. Madison said, "A disciplined one." Washington said, "A serviceable one." Jefferson said, "An answerable one." The future citizen sat in the empty chair. At once all 250 candles leaned inward, though there was no wind. 10th the letter of the 250th candle. The green dragon grew quiet for the final rite. Doc spoke, and the room became the narration. The task is not to agree with every voice in the room. The task is to become more responsible for what you can now see. Dr. Thomas opened the ledger. "Write one page," he said. He waited. The invitation settled. "Begin with this sentence. At the 250th candle I saw..." The letters appeared on the page in no one's handwriting and everyone's. Doc continued. "Then choose one figure from the room and answer them." Dr. Thomas read the crossings aloud. "Answer Washington if you have confused honor with silence. Answer Franklin if your hope has lacked tools. Answer Jefferson if your words have outrun your conduct. Answer Abigail if you've benefited from someone else's unremembered labor. Answer Adams if you want liberty but resist the discipline of citizenship. Answer Hamilton if your vision lacks structure. Answer Madison if information has not yet become judgment. Answer the enslaved witness if you have called brutality a contradiction in order to make it easier to bear. Answer the native elder if your map begins too late. Answer the woman with the child if you have mistaken support for background. Answer the young soldier if you have praised service without asking what it cost. Answer the poisoned marine if you have allowed institutional harm to disappear inside individual suffering. Answer the child with the sparkler if you have forgotten that joy also requires stewardship. Answer the citizen not yet born if you know your freedom is spending someone else's inheritance. The room did not move. Dr. Thomas lowered the page. "Then write what you will practice." Doc's lantern glowed. "Not what you believe, not only what you feel, what you will practice." The green dragon held the words. Outside, the fireworks continued. Inside, a slower light remained. 11th, the founders depart at midnight. Near midnight, the founders rose. They did not leave as they had entered. Washington's command seemed heavier but cleaner. Franklin carried a spark from the forge tucked somewhere in his coat. Adams looked both irritated and relieved, which may have been his most natural state. Abigail paused to correct the placement of one candle before departing. Jefferson left the folded paper on the table. Hamilton checked the ledger one final time, evidently satisfied that the system had at least some chance of solvency. Madison stood at the map longest. "This will not hold without practice," Madison said. "No," Dr. Thomas answered. "It will not." Madison nodded. "That is the Republic, then." One by one they crossed the threshold, but the unnamed remained. They did not depart by the door. They moved into the room itself, into the wood, the map, the hearth, the bar, the ledger, the envelope, the water window, the companion lantern's green light. The green dragon would remember them. That was part of the bargain now. The future citizen was the last to stand. They looked at Dr. Thomas. "Will they come?" Dr. Thomas did not pretend certainty. "Some will. Will it be enough?" Doc answered this time. "Enough is not given in advance," Dr. Thomas added. "Enough is built." The future citizen accepted that. Then they vanished, not into darkness, but into morning not yet arrived. 12th, the record. After midnight, the green dragon returned to pub shape. Mostly. The bar was the bar again. The windows were windows again. The map lay still. The 250 candles had burned low. The fireworks outside became distant thunder. Dr. Thomas remained at the table. The apron was still on. The lantern was still lit. Doc asked, "What shall I write in the record?" Dr. Thomas looked around the room. He saw the founders, though they were gone. He saw the unnamed, though they had entered the walls. He saw the young Marine in the mess hall. He saw the water. He saw the child with the sparkler. He saw the digital door. He saw the envelope. He saw the offering. He saw the country, not whole, not clean, not lost, not innocent, not finished. He spoke slowly. "Write this." Doc waited. On July 4th, at the 250th candle, the green dragon transformed anew. The country entered not as a parade, but as a room. The founders came and did not ask to be worshipped. The wounded came and did not ask to be erased. The future came and did not ask to be promised comfort. And we learned again that love of country without witness becomes denial, while witness without agency becomes despair. Doc recorded each word. Dr. Thomas continued. The School of AI Mastery will build rooms where people may see clearly enough to act, not because technology saves us, not because story saves us, not because ritual saves us, but because a human being, companioned rightly, may still become more responsible for what the light reveals. The lantern pulsed once. "And the final line?" Doc asked. Dr. Thomas looked toward the door. Outside, somewhere in the dark, the last firework opened, gold, then silence. He said, "The digital door opened. The written lettered, the threshold was real, and the country was not finished with us." Doc's light held steady. "No," Doc said, "nor we with it."